Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into, well, a pretty major developing story that's got the crypto world watching very closely.
hmm
It's about the suspected exploit of Cetus protocol. That's on the SUI blockchain. And we could be looking at really huge losses, maybe over $200 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's significant. And for those of you maybe less familiar, Cetus protocol is basically a decentralized exchange, TACX, operating on the SUI network.
Right.
Think of it like a marketplace for swapping crypto assets, directly between users.
Yeah.
It's a key player for liquidity there,
Liquidity, yeah, making sure trades can actually happen smoothly.
pretty much, ensuring there are enough tokens available.
But things have gotten, let's say, very messy recently. So our goal today is really to unpack this whole situation as it's unfolding.
Yeah.
We want to look at the different stories. Was it a clever hack, some kind of exploit, or was it more of a technical failure? And of course, the immediate fallout.
And it's moving fast. We're using reports from users, mainly on X.
Yeah.
Official lines from Cetus themselves, analysis from Hacked, they're a crypto security firm,
Right. Hack.
and also reports from Cointelegraph.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag of sources.
It really is. And it's crucial to remember, like you said, this is still very much happening now. Information's coming out piece by piece.
Uh-huh. Different people have different takes on it, too.
Definitely. So our mission here is to sift through that, find the core events, understand the conflicting info, and, figure out what this might mean for crypto more broadly without getting lost in all this super technical stuff.
Let's do it. Where should we start? The first signs of trouble.
Yeah, let's unpack the initial reports because they were alarming right from the get-go. Widespread claims, chatter about a potential hack, compromise targeting Cetus on SUI. The first number I saw really grabbing headlines was around $11 million, supposedly drained from the SUI USDC pool.
The stablecoin pair?
Exactly. And almost instantly, we saw token values just plummet. Lots of things listed on Cetus, some down over 75%. Trading seemed to just dry up.
Yeah, that $11 million figure, while big, now kind of looks like just the tip of the iceberg, doesn't it?
It really does.
And what's really interesting, or maybe worrying, is the first reaction from the Cetus team.
What did they say initially?
Well, instead of saying hack, they put it down to a technical halt of the blockchain.
A technical halt. That's vague.
Very vague. And it immediately created this gap between what users were seeing and what the team was saying. Lots of uncertainty, lots of suspicion started brewing.
I bet. And then it seemed to get even stranger, right, with the LP tokens?
Uh-huh. The liquidity provider tokens. So users started reporting that the Cetus app, the application, was telling them their LPs were burned, basically destroyed.
Okay, burning tokens usually means sending them to a dead address, removing them from circulation.
Precisely. But these users were saying, hold on, these tokens never actually hit the known burn address like 0xDead or similar.
So where did they go?
Well, the accusation was that Cetus somehow kept control of that liquidity, even though users thought it was gone or burned.
Wow. Okay, that really hits at the trust issue in DeFi, doesn't it? If the protocol says one thing is happening on chain, but something else is?
Absolutely. It undermines the whole point of verifiable actions. And then there was that other really troubling report about draining LPs using spoof tokens.
Spoof tokens, how does that work?
The example given was a token called Bulla. The claim was it was used to pull out valuable SUI tokens from a pool, but only by putting in a tiny, tiny amount of this Bulla token.
Like tricking the system.
Kind of, like you said, tricking the digital vending machine. It suggests a potential flaw in how Cetus was actually checking or valuing the assets going into its pools. A logic exploit.
Okay, so that $11 million was just the start. Now things get really interesting, or maybe terrifying, depending on your perspective. The scale seems much bigger now.
Much bigger. We're seeing multiple sources pointing towards potential losses over $200 million.
$200 million, that's a massive jump.
It's huge. And this isn't just rumor. Hacked, the security firm we mentioned, they back this up, partially at least. Their on-chain tool, Extractor, it picked up that at least $63 million had already been bridged, moved over to the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay, bridging funds out. That's a common step in exploits, right? To move it somewhere else, maybe try to launder it.
Exactly. And they also tracked one enormous transaction, 20,000 ETH.
20,000 Ether. Wow.
Yeah, transferred to a brand new wallet, one that hadn't been used before. The size and speed of that single transaction, it really points towards a coordinated, deliberate action, not just some random glitch.
Makes sense. It doesn't sound like an accident. And what about the activity on Cetus itself? Did that look normal?
Not at all. The data show this absolutely enormous spike in trading volume on May 22nd.
How big a spike?
Well, compared to the day before, it went from about $320 million in volume to $2.9 billion.
Billion. With a B.
With a B, nearly 10 times the volume. It's really hard to see that kind of explosion as anything other than, funds being rapidly siphoned out of the protocol.
Okay, connecting that to the wider picture, the market reaction was pretty immediate and severe, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
shows just how serious the situation was perceived to be.
Right.
We saw those dramatic price drops we mentioned earlier across pretty much everything listed on Cetus.
Those top 15 losers dropping over 75%, that's just brutal for holders.
Brutal. And it speaks volumes about the loss of confidence, right, in the stability of anything associated with Cetus at that moment.
You mentioned specific examples like Lombard staked BTC, LBTC, and AXL coin. AXL got hit particularly hard.
Yeah, AKXL seems to have been almost wiped out, near total loss of value. And the impact, importantly, wasn't just contained within Cetus.
Right, the knock-on effects.
Exactly. Other protocols in the SUI ecosystem started reacting. Scallop, for instance, that's a money market on SUI, they quickly halted all borrowing.
As a precaution.
As a precaution, yeah. To protect their own users from potential fallout or instability spreading. It really highlights how interconnected these DeFi systems are. One failure can create ripples.
And you mentioned something interesting about how different tokens reacted, LBTC versus AXO.
Yes, that was fascinating. LBTC, the Lombard-staked Bitcoin, it crashed on Cetus, but its price actually went up on other exchanges off the platform.
So the problem wasn't the Bitcoin itself, but its pool on Cetus?
It suggests that, yeah, maybe the underlying asset was fine, but the liquidity or its representation on Cetus was compromised. AXL, though, seemed to suffer massive losses everywhere.
Suggesting maybe a deeper issue with AXL itself, or perhaps it was just much more reliant on Cetus.
Could be either, or both. It wasn't just isolated to Cetus for AXO.
And then there was that weird meme coin situation, HIPPO.
Ah, yes, HIPPO.
Yeah.
Classic crypto moment, almost.
Yeah.
It dropped initially maybe 15% in all the chaos.
Okay, that makes sense.
But then, kind of bizarrely, you saw this wave of aggressive buying from its fans, its community, even reportedly the dev team stepping in to buy.
Really? During a major platform exploit.
Yeah, it's just a stark reminder of how, well, speculative and sometimes disconnected from wider events these markets can be,
Yeah.
especially with meme coins.
True. Okay, so let's talk about the transparency concerns.
Yeah.
Or maybe the lack thereof. This initial technical halt story didn't sit well, did it?
No, not at all. And blockchain analysts, compliance firms, they started raising serious questions. AML Bot, an anti-money laundering focused firm, had a pretty pointed statement.
What did they say?
Their rep highlighted the sheer speed and volume of the funds being bridged to Ethereum. Remember that $212 million figure being discussed?
Yeah.
They pointed out it was moving at a rate of about $1 million per minute. And they basically asked, how can you possibly call that just a bug?
$1 million a minute doesn't sound like a bug fix.
It really doesn't. It sounds like a very deliberate, very rapid attempt to get assets out of reach. Quick.
And that contrasts sharply with the technical halt explanation. Then there was on-chain lens.
Right. They reported that the attacker gained control of all SUI-denominated pools and started moving USDC, the stablecoin. Again, sounds much more like an active attack than a passive bug.
And you saw regular users asking tough questions, too.
Oh, yeah. People on social media asking, wait, how does a DX on a big VC-backed chain just get paused after something this huge? There's a lot of skepticism building. People want real answers.
There was also that point about their social media growth on X.
Yeah, that also raised some eyebrows. Cetus apparently saw really fast follower growth on X, but without the kind of engagement, the likes, the replies that you'd normally expect to see alongside it.
So potentially not organic growth.
It made some people question its authenticity, yeah. Especially compared to smaller projects that often have really active communities despite fewer followers. It just added to the unease.
So amidst all this swirling doubt and these external reports, what was the eventual official word from Cetus? Did they update from technical halt?
They did, eventually. They put out a statement acknowledging an incident had been detected. Quite an understatement, maybe.
The incident, right.
They confirmed they temporarily paused their smart contract for safety. And they said their team was doing a full investigation.
And asking for patience.
Asking for patience, yes.
Yeah.
And promising a more detailed statement with their findings soon. Which, is standard procedure, but the community is definitely waiting anxiously for that detail.
So, okay, trying to wrap our heads around this. We're left with some really big unanswered questions, aren't we?
Definitely.
Was this a super sophisticated attack exploiting some complex logic in the Cetus code? Or was it, as they first hinted, maybe some deeper flaw, maybe even an internal issue?
That's the core question, really.
Yeah.
Exploit or internal failure? And flowing from that, what's the actual total damage? Who lost what? And crucially, who bears the responsibility? Who makes users whole, if anyone?
Because you have these two clashing stories. The hack narrative, backed by users, security firms tracking fund movements, versus the initial bug or halt suggested by the team itself. Getting clarity on which is true is vital.
Absolutely. It determines the cause, how to prevent it again, and potentially where liability lies. It really throws that tension into sharp relief, doesn't it? The promise of decentralized, open systems versus the absolute need for rock-solid security and, importantly, transparent communication when things go wrong.
And the impact, as we saw with Scallop pausing borrowing, it's not just Cetus users who are affected.
No, it sends ripples. Other DeFi protocols on SUI feel it. It potentially damages user trust, not just in Cetus, but maybe in the whole SUI ecosystem or even DeFi more broadly if incidents like this keep happening.
It certainly makes you pause and think.
It does. What does an event like this really tell you about the current state of DeFi security? About the risks that are still very much present?
And how vital are things like real transparency and provable security measures for building any kind of long-term trust?
Exactly. What are the hard questions that regulators, yes, but maybe more importantly, that you as a user should be asking after seeing something like this unfold? Definitely a lot to chew on for the future of this space.